I'm the fourth accountant, and today it's all about entrepreneurs. In the UK, the government tells us that we must attract the best and brightest. Well, because presumably, these are the people that will start businesses and create jobs and make us all richer. The operative word being all of us. Typically, the way the government attracts top talent and signals we are open for business is by introducing business-friendly tax rules. Basically, in one way or another, they simply lower taxes.
But the heart of this plan that I think is going to benefit everybody is that cut in the corporate rate, making us competitive with the rest of the world. A lot of research showing that when you cut corporate tax rates, companies invest more. What that does is it lifts productivity, which means workers make more money. And that's really the goal here, to get us out of kind of the slow growth Obama era into a faster growth era with more opportunity.
Yeah, understandably. And hey, if nothing else, let's at least be competitive with Canada.
The rate of corporation tax paid on company profits will increase to 25%.
Interesting.
Even after this change, the UK will still have the lowest corporation tax rate in the G7 group of countries. Lower than the United States, Canada, Italy, Japan, Germany, and France, and the fifth lowest in the G20 group of countries.
In my opinion, this is just another version of trickle-down economics, and I really don't have time for this. If you want to understand why I currently have this opinion, there is a lot of great content out there which you can watch. I will leave some links below. Now, those who take risks and start businesses should be incentivized to do so, and if they become successful, they will create jobs, which will increase spending and increase investment as a whole. This is great stuff, and any entrepreneurs who have done this deserve all the cash they can get their hands on. But, and bear with me on this, was any wealth created? I would even go so far as to ask, was any value created? Do not even get me started on value-added tax.
No, I mean, what do we make?
I don't follow. We make money.
No, I know we make money. I mean, what do we create?
We create wealth.
No. I mean, what do we build? What do we design, you know? Because I have some ideas that could really help the company.
Charlie. We don't build anything. Leave that to the chinks.
Well, let's explore this. Wealth is relative, and if you happen to be very wealthy, it usually means you have a lot more assets or resources compared to the majority of people. The point here is that to be considered wealthy, the majority of those around you cannot, by definition, also be wealthy. Value can be viewed as something of use, worth, or importance. This is a subjective view and a matter of perspective. Essentially, something is only valuable if someone else thinks it is, or they can find a beneficiary use.
Hold on a minute.
Entrepreneurs do create things of value, and that's how they make their money. What's the fucking problem?
Well, the answer is there is no fucking problem. I would simply suggest that what entrepreneurs actually create are value propositions, which other people may or may not see as valuable. To me, a value proposition is not the same as value. This distinction is important when considering the disconnect between what businesses want to charge versus what people are actually prepared to pay. Nintendo, I'm looking at you right now. Now, if we think about wealth creation, if entrepreneurs create jobs, which they do, and make profits, which they could do, and pay taxes, which they do, then it can definitely feel like wealth is being created. But if wealth represents the accumulation and concentration of assets or resources, then this requires a transfer of assets and resources. And I believe this is what value propositions enable entrepreneurs to do successfully. Now, to be very clear, provided everyone enters into commercial agreements freely, this transfer of assets will represent a fair exchange. But the purpose of a business is to enable the transfer of resources from a large number of people to a smaller number of people as efficiently and profitably as possible. In fact, they must do this to fend off other businesses with competing value propositions. Also, when businesses start, typically they make losses whilst going through the early development stage.
WeWork, the bleeding continues for the real estate company. In a bond presentation to investors, WeWork said that its net losses more than doubled in Q3, $1.25 billion in Q3 versus $497 million a year ago, and this as their revenues nearly doubled. It also said that its metric for customers, 115,000 desks, recording a record amount in Q3, up from 53,000 desks a year ago. But again, the big headline here, the net loss more than doubling in Q3, even as revenues nearly doubled.
And every time I pick up the paper, each year it loses more money than it lost the year before. The company's never made a profit.
That's right.
Now, why? How does it? Why? How does that? Why?
It seems like a new math, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. I mean, it's to someone who doesn't know anything about this. It's amazing. You know, we lost $12 million last year, and we're doing great.
Well, there are a whole series of Doonesbury cartoons about this. This is not a new phenomenon. We are a famously unprofitable company,
right.
And we are investing in the future. It's not, which isn't unusual. Companies have done this before. What's a little surprising about Amazon.com is the scale at which we're doing it.
But there is also a whole host of tax reliefs to help entrepreneurs become successful eventually. There are even government schemes to provide businesses with grants and allow early investors to lower their personal tax by investing in early startups.
So what? We need people to invest in startups, and investors are putting all their money at risk.
Yeah, that's fair, but it's also a matter of perspective. Another perspective is that the money invested would have been taxed anyway. The tax cannot be legally avoided. So, knowing this, a wealthy person might as well invest in a startup which provides the opportunity for a massive return. And this next point is really important. If you are already extremely wealthy, you are rich enough to keep playing the game until one win completely dwarfs any investment losses. You only need to find one unicorn at the end of this rainbow. And remember, the investor still gets tax relief on any investment losses. That being said, all of this is great for businesses. But this also means that businesses that, remember, are intended to allow entrepreneurs and early investors to accumulate personal assets are initially directly and indirectly subsidized by guess who? You, the taxpayer. Yes, Elon, I'm talking about you again. This context is important when considering the self-made argument and the validity of a personal wealth tax as a way of providing the taxpayer a fair financial return on their indirect investment in loss-making startups. So, do entrepreneurs create wealth and value? Well, to be honest, who the fuck cares? What is more important is to understand what a business is and what it is for. And put simply, a business is a value proposition intended to enable entrepreneurs and early investors to accumulate assets and resources from people as efficiently as possible. This is just capitalism. Hate the game, not the players. However, the impact of this is undeniable. The natural consequence is increased wealth inequality, and the answer is not a smaller state. Check out channels like Gary's Economics and Jimmy the Giant to get a deeper perspective on this. But, like most things in life, perspective is important. Wealth inequality is not necessarily a bad thing. One could even argue it stimulates competition and human endeavour. The issue is when being wealthy becomes less about fair competition and more about who has the majority of assets and resources already. A wealth tax, for example, could help address the issue because typically the ability to continually accumulate personal assets and resources was initially subsidized by the taxpayer. But more importantly, assets and resources are limited. So, what happens when there is nothing left to compete for?
Good evening. I'm speaking to you tonight to give you a report on the state of our nation's economy, and regret to say that we're in the worst economic mess since the Great Depression. A few days ago, I was presented with a report I'd asked for, a comprehensive audit, if you will, of our economic condition. You won't like it. I didn't like it. But we have to face the truth and then go to work to turn things around. And make no mistake about it, we can turn them around. We invented the assembly line and mass production, but punitive tax policies and excessive and unnecessary regulations, plus government borrowing, have stifled our ability to update plant and equipment. When capital investment is made, it's too often for some unproductive alterations demanded by government to meet various of its regulations. Excessive taxation of individuals has robbed us of incentive and made overtime unprofitable. We once produced about 40% of the world's steel. We now produce 19%. We were once the greatest producer of automobiles, producing more than all the rest of the world combined. That is no longer true. We must not be timid. We will restore the freedom of all men and women to excel and to create. We will unleash the energy and genius of the American people, traits which have never failed us. We can create the incentives which take advantage of the genius of our economic system. A system, as Walter Lippmann observed more than 40 years ago, which for the first time in history gave men, quote, a way of producing wealth in which the good fortune of others multiplied their own, unquote. Our aim is to increase our national wealth so all will have more, not just redistribute what we already have, which is just a sharing of scarcity.